the traditional territory of the Tuolumne First Nations. And I know we have a variety of folks coming from the different territories in the Nuu-chah-nulth group, and I'd like to make that acknowledgement first. And then I'd like to notice to attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. Very exciting website, by the way. And that can be accessed through the ACRD. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda today? Thank you, Director McEwen, seconded by Director Siga. All in favor? Wonderful. Motion carried. And then could I have a motion to accept the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on March 3rd, 2023 to be received? Thank you, Director Johnson, seconded by Director Sega. I'm just going to take that one right off the air there. All those in favor? Wonderful. Motion approved. And this morning, we do have a few excellent topics on the agenda. First and foremost is a request for decision on West Coast Transit. And I believe I can see coming up on the screen, there's Eddie right there. Good morning, Eddie.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm happy to present this report and speak to it. So as the West Coast Committee is aware, we did bring a report to you in early December, kind of outlining the options we had in lieu of provincial funding being made available for the service. So staff have been working with Watt Consulting, who are a very experienced consulting firm working with transit services around the province of BC and Alberta, and really specialize in focusing on implementing services where it is somewhat difficult and challenging to do so. So we began working with them and kind of looking to identify alternative interim solutions for the West Coast Transit Service. So this kicked off in January of 2023. January 18th, we held our first working group meeting with the West Coast Transportation Working Group, which consisted of a larger group that had met prior to the BC Transit Service kind of being kicked off. At this meeting, it was communicated, the approach that Watt Consulting would take was communicated to the group, which involved communicating with all transportation providers in the region, and then trying to come to a determination through those conversations who could potentially provide an interim service and who would be interested in providing an interim service for the region. This was all done with the ultimate approach in mind of sustainability and the long-term focus that, ultimately we did want to continue to work towards a BC Transit led service in the long run. So we wanted to make sure that any of these interim steps, we always kept the big picture in mind. So through these conversations, Watt Consulting determined that there were enough interested parties in the region who had expressed interest in providing a service that we could kind of move to the next step, which was kind of termed as a guided quote process. We kind of came up with that term and then communicated that process to the larger working group via email, outlining why and how it would take place. And the group was overall supportive of the process. So through Watt Consulting and the ACRD, we decided to put out a request for expression of interest to these transportation parties to take part in the guided quote process. So with this, we had 4 interested parties. It was out on our website, public for 3 weeks, and we had 4 parties who were interested in potentially providing a quote and taking part in the guided quote process. Ultimately, though, with the guided quote process completing on May 19th, we just did receive 1 submission. One of the potential proponents communicated that they weren't able to provide year-round service, and that was really what we were looking forward was something that could provide that consistent year-round service to make sure we had a suitable provider. And then one of the proponents cited a lack of potential labor in the area as a reason to withdraw. So we ultimately did receive 1 submission. That submission was from Pacific Western Transportation, or PWT, and they are a very well-experienced transportation and transit provider in the area. They operate the transit systems on behalf of BC Transit all over the Central and North Island. So they operate Port Alberni, both custom and conventional. They operate Campbell River, Comox Valley, and Mount Waddington. So they are a very experienced transportation company. The submission was looked over closely, so we established an evaluation committee, which consisted of members of District of Ucluelet, District of Tofino, Hutuathat, and Cloquet, and the ACRD. And we all went over it and kind of discussed the proposal and really decided that it did touch on everything we are looking for as a way to provide that interim service for the residents of the West Coast. Some key items within that is the ability to provide flexible year-round service. All key personnel will be located on Vancouver Island, and then PWT looking to hire a lead hand local driver, a full-time driver, and another part-time driver from the West Coast. Next steps of this, if we're successful in moving forward, so the recommendation is to award the contract to PWT and give the CAO the ability to negotiate to a maximum amount of $535,000 for the annual service. Their submission came in at $520,000, which is under the max tax requisition of $550,000 as per bylaw E1062, the establishing bylaw. That amount will be further offset by any fair revenue collected. And I think it's important to keep in mind that when we look at what the BC Transit service would have been before fair revenue, we are looking at $588,295 before the fair revenue was calculated. We currently have no tax requisition in the 23 to 27 financial plan, so that will have to be re-added prior to 2024 if we're looking to implement for January of 2024, which is when we would try to get the service up and running for. Prior, just kind of for reference as well, prior to the 2023 removal, the requisition for the service had been estimated to run from $515,000 to $539,000. So we are kind of right in line with that in that amount that we would have been. So next steps, we'll be working again to negotiate with PWT, and then we will be working to develop a detailed implementation plan. We will continue to work with Watt Consulting on that if successful. We do have the amount of $18,500 in the financial plan this year for the implementation support. And then we will also be identifying and applying for grants from the Rural Transit Solutions Fund to assist with the necessary infrastructure for the service. There are quite a few streams that I think it speaks exactly to what our service provides when we talk about the need for partnership, which this service is, and the Rural Transit Solutions connecting communities for economic growth, for improved day-to-day quality of life instances. So that is pretty much, in a nutshell, what we are looking to do. And again, we put that maximum amount of $535,000 in the recommendation. The bid came in at 520, but we did want to make sure we had some wiggle room in negotiations, because after talking with the working group, it was definitely communicated that we would need to ensure that service levels worked for the people of the West Coast, and that would likely include service 7 days a week due to the nature of the work life there. So that's my report. Definitely happy to discuss and open to any questions the committee may have.
Great, thank you, Eddie. Appreciate very much. I'll open it up to the committee if there are any questions for Eddie or comments. Director McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. I see that in the report that the Pacific Western Transportation is going to purchase 3 new light-duty vehicles. Is there a route, and are the stops, have they been identified yet, or is that part of the negotiation?
Yeah, through the chair. So yes, they are going to procure 3 light-duty vehicles for us, and then within negotiations, as with any transportation and transit agreement, there is a lease fee that local governments pay. So it's similar with BC Transit vehicles. BC Transit owns the vehicles and municipalities pay a lease fee for the vehicle. So that'll be a similar. As far as routing, routing had been identified as a part of the initial BC Transit service. And it was really what we were looking to do as the initial point was to kind of keep that routing similar. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel at this point. We wanted to make sure that we got a service out on the road that was interim for the residents as quickly as possible. Now, That being said, I think what we will do as part of the implementation is just make sure that route still makes sense. So through communications with the partners, make sure the routing still makes sense. And then make sure that the trip times especially really make sense for the residents. So we're hitting, we're making sure that the bus, if we are having, let's say 2 p.m. trips from Tofino to Ucluelet, that we're making sure they work with the timings of the workers in Tofino. So I think that will be a part of the implementation process. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up. When the BC Transit did their study, the Ucluelet thought was included as part of this route, and I assume that that's still the case.
And through the chair, yes, the plan at this point is still to deviate on the trips to Hitatsu and provide that service. But definitely, I think that's a key component of the service when we talk about connecting communities.
Thank you.
No, look to the committee if there's any other questions or comments. I have. I see our CAO has got his hand up. Please go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you. I just wanted to flag the excellent work of the committee and the group. Regardless of whatever decision or recommendation the committee makes, putting together this type of solution this quickly, getting the parties together to have this type of dialogue, and maintaining the same costs that we would have incurred if we were with BC Transit is in my book slightly miraculous. And so I just I've worked in a lot of communities and have seen a lot of different troubleshooting. Rarely have I seen a solution come back that is actually on budget and pretty much on time like that. And so I think it needs to be said, and I just want to thank Eddie for his good work. But I'll also just want to flag, that our health network worked on this, Ucluelet, Tofino, the nations, what a good team and what a great solution. And so it's just fantastic to see this come together. So I had to say thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll look to the committee again. I have a couple questions and comments. See no others. So Eddie, I just in the report it indicated, and you alluded quickly to no weekend service in this part of the contract. And within your verbal report, you indicated that potentially with a little bit of wiggle room with the way that you've allocated the budget here. I think this would be an important consideration, as we know many of the working communities and our weekends are part of our work week. And I think it would be a critical conversation to be having with our service provider to be able to include that. I don't know if you have any comment on that in terms of conversations that may have been indicated.
Yeah, definitely. And through the chair, and thank you for bringing that comment forth. We met with the West Coast Transportation Working Group last week and kind of went through a similar type report and gave them an update. And it was really communicated strongly there of the need for that 7-day-a-week service. That, the working climate on the West Coast can be a little bit different than other locations. And a lot of people do work and move on Saturday and Sunday. So it was definitely stressed as important. It was heard, and it will definitely be something that we look to do. Initially, when we were looking to set up an interim service, it was like, okay, let's put the meat and the potatoes, the 5 days a week thing, the typical. But we're not typical. We need to be aware, right? And that's a good thing. And we need to make sure that we're providing a service that works for the residents. So yes, we will be looking to identify that 7-day-a-week service.
Great, thank you, Eddie. I have another question, and it's somewhat outside the box. In the initial conversations back in the transit days, former Mayor Osborne, we met with SD70 around looking at ways of decreasing costs for the transit service potentially out. And one of the conversations with SD70 at the time was the potential for the conversation around that bus service, the school bus service. And as they indicated to us, it is a contract that is negotiated. And I don't know if there has been any, I know this has been outside the box in terms of what we've been asked to do here. I don't know if SD70 has been included in any of that conversation around the new potential service being allocated for the West Coast.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. And I do believe that they, the provider for the SC70 service was a part of those conversations.
Okay.
So whoever that's contracted out, and yes, those conversations did take place. It was really one of those things where when looking at the ultimate way to provide the service, rather than piecing it together, it was looking at, okay, can we do it? Is there a way first to focus on having that consistent service provider just for continuity? For, you know, to have the customer know who's providing the service, one kind of outreach, one number to speak to. So that was kind of the first approach that was kind of looked at rather than piecing it.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And then just one last follow-up, and it may be directed more towards our CAO. We have UBCM coming up, and already the request for conversations with ministers is coming up. And I'm just going to look to maybe to Daniel to, I suspect if it's not on the radar, I'm sure it is on the radar, to maybe have another meeting with Minister Fleming just to indicate where we're at and if we can get an update potentially when new service expansion may be coming to the West Coast.
Absolutely. So it is on the radar, and it is something that we ought to do. We haven't come back to the board yet to get our list of meetings, and so we're not as quick as Tofino and Ucluelet. I'll give a shout out to both of your CAOs who have already been asking us to put together meetings. But I see that our corporate officer has something to say too.
Yes, thanks, Daniel. So we did receive the invites last week for meetings with ministers and the premier. So I have a report ready for the board agenda next week. So I'll make a note that this is one of the topics we'd like to include.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. And I see Eddie has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add through the chair as well that, you know, we have also continued to remain in contact with BC Transit. So we are having those discussions as a part of the expansion initiative process. We are again identifying, we worked with the language again with BC Transit, but it's not introducing the service, it's enhancing and optimizing if there's an existing service. So we are continuing to try to work with BC Transit and ensure that we're putting our submissions in for that provincial funding as well.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate all the work on this. And so I'll just reiterate what Daniel had spoken to, the amount of work that staff and the communities have put into this. We know how critical a service this is, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. Seeing no other questions or comments, if one of my colleagues would read out our resolution, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Director McEwen.
I would love to read this out. I would move that the West Coast Committee recommends that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors award the West Coast Transit Service provision contract to Pacific Western Transportation up to a maximum amount of $535,000, excluding GST, and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the West Coast Transit Service provision contract on behalf of the regional district.
I have a seconder, please. Thank you, Director Johnson. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Next on the agenda, another request for decision, Long Beach Airport, a memorandum of understanding. And I think I see Jenny is already on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so we're bringing this back to the committee. We spoke, I think it was in December of last year. We updated our airport fees bylaw to increase passenger fees by $250, and we've been discussing this for at least a year now. Since our last report to the committee and discussion on this, staff have met, ACRD staff and Tloquet First Nation staff have gotten together a couple times, and we have drafted up a memorandum of understanding, which is attached to this report. Essentially, it goes over a few objectives and has some good language in there. The key items is that we are looking to work together, and some of the items we hope to work on over the course of a 3-year memorandum of understanding is the development of a longer term protocol agreement that will then take place after the agreement is expired. Working on, of course, the land use management and development plan for the airport. reviewing all of the applications, because we do get a lot of the lease applications at the airport, and making sure that we're sharing those and reviewing those together. And then looking at the development of a communications and signage plan to identify some traditional territory, to identify that there's the traditional territory there, and provide some other cultural interpretation. We are looking to, as I mentioned, we've updated our airport fees bylaw. So we are looking to provide some funding to help and make sure that the participation from both parties is covered and adequately resourced, because there is going to be a lot of time involved. We're hoping to meet on about a quarterly basis. And the land use management plan, when we start working on that later this year, is going to be, it's just time involvement to make sure that we're having good and meaningful discussions. If the committee passes the resolution, this will then also go to the board, and the Tloquit First Nation leadership will also be reviewing and approving this on their side. And so we will look to enter into this, and then hopefully have a bit of a celebration event to mark this great occasion of formal partnership. So happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. This is really exciting. I'll look to the board if there's any questions or comments. Don't see any hands being raised. I do have just a quick comment. This is really exciting. This type of agreement, I think it is going to set as a model. I think it's going to be wonderful. I'm really looking forward to that in 3 years' time. That longer-term agreement and that formal recognition of this collaboration and agreement on there, and the work that's been done by both parties, phenomenal once again. So with that in mind, once again, if I could ask one of my colleagues, we have a resolution recommendation here. Great, thank you, Veda. If you'd love to read that out. You are on mute, though. Can you get off of mute? There we go.
There. I'm having computer issues today. I would like to move that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors authorize the CAO to enter into a memorandum of understanding regarding the Long Beach Airport between the Tloquit First Nation and Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District for a term commencing the 1st of July 2023 and ending the 31st of June 2026.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll move the question. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Next on the list, and I see Jenny is still there, we have a request for decision on R1036-2 West Coast Waste Materials Regulation and Charges 2023 amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we have had the three-stream collection program in place for a while now, and we are regularly discussing with our contractor who does the collection on any issues. And one that has come up is that it is starting to become very difficult to make the landfill closure timelines. We would like to maintain the landfill hours. We think they are appropriate, and instead we all agreed that it would just be easier if we can make the pickup time start earlier. This will only affect a small portion of the public, but everyone's schedule might be shifted. So if this is approved, we will have a strong communication plan letting everyone know that do not expect your garbage to be picked up when it has been picked up, because everyone's getting shifted earlier. Try to get it out as early as possible, and we will have reduced missed pickups. I think that's pretty much the essence of it. For the most part, I think the challenges are in Ucluelet, but again, as residents, you will get a notification if this is going to impact you. Happy to answer any questions.
I'll look to the committee. Veda.
How early are we speaking?
Through the chair, the bylaw currently reads 8 o'clock. So the earliest pickup has to be later than 8 o'clock. So our contractor can't pick up before that. So we're going to amend the bylaw that it'll be 7 o'clock. This is the same as in Port Alberni. So and it's not unheard of. The 7 o'clock pickup is pretty common.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I'm one of the first people, so mine will have to be out there before 7, which is okay. I walk the dog at 6:30, so great. So if I could have one of my committee members please read out this resolution.
I'll read. That the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors give 3 readings and adopt the bylaw R1036-2 West Coast Waste Materials Regulation and Charges 2023 amendment.
Seconded. Thank you, Director McEwen. I'll call the question. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Next on the list, since we'll just continue down with R1033-4 West Coast Landfill Tipping Fee Bylaw Amendment. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. This bylaw amendment is looking to change a couple of our fee rates and then also add in policy. So the first one is our mattresses, and I actually thought I would give a little more background because I realized we have some new directors on the West Coast Committee. So starting in 2019, we started diverting mattresses. The reason that we were able to start doing this is because we had a mattress recycling facility start up in Port Alberni. This is a social enterprise which hires people who are have barriers to employment, provides them training and experience in doing mattress recycling. This has a huge benefit to us because otherwise they really did have to get landfilled. The closest mattress recycling was basically the mainland at the time. So it's an excellent initiative. They actually just celebrated the recycling of 30,000 mattresses last month. And so we're very happy. And one of the ways that we have supported them, really, we haven't had to do much, but we have set up a place for these mattresses to be located, and we are collecting tipping fees. And then they basically charge for the cost recovery for recycling those mattresses. The prices to recycle mattresses, as everything does, has gone up a bit. They've said that the costs are going up, and we've said we have no problem increasing those fees to make sure that you're recovering those. So we are looking to increase the fees from $20 per mattress to $23 per mattress. We are also continuing to lobby the provincial government who sets the regulations around those recycling eco fees, because you pay upfront for your electronics. When you buy a TV, you probably pay about $50 to get that recycled. Mattresses are on the future list to get an eco fee attached to them, at which time those mattresses will be dropped off for free, and then they'll be basically paid for upfront, and that's how they get recycled. So until that time, we will continue to support this recycling program, and I think it's a wonderful program for the community on many levels, and also diverts waste for us. Okay, so then we've got corrugated cardboard. As we're always trying to bring on more diversion streams, we did find an opportunity to try to divert more commercial cardboard. So residential cardboard goes into the depots or the commercial stream, but commercial cardboard is the responsibility of the commercial businesses. Some businesses are small or it doesn't make sense for them to have their own cardboard bin. So we established this program at the landfill relatively recently. And now we've tracked what the costs are for us to do that, because you can guess, but you don't always know until you're doing it. So we've reviewed that. The costs are significantly higher than we expected, which is fine. So we're going to do this in a twofold. We're going to increase the tipping fees for commercial businesses so that we're, again, recovering the cost for those. And then we're also going to try to adjust how we're operating the service, basically reducing the number of times that those bins are serviced, which reduces our costs. And we'll circle back and review that in a year. And if the program has come closer to recovery, then that's good. The alternative is that we don't want people putting cardboard into somewhere where it shouldn't go. So this is why we'll continue to tweak this, and we do this with new diversion streams. The last part, which is the policy amendment, is that we are basically strengthening our language around accounts that aren't getting paid. So if someone doesn't pay their account and they get suspended more than twice in a 12-month period, then we can terminate their account. And then when they're using the landfill, it has to be a pay-as-you-go system. And the only way they can be reinstated is by going to the board and making a special request. This is very strong language, and we hope that it will address a very small group of problematic users. So those are the 3 amendments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. I'll look to the committee to see if there's any questions or comments. Not seeing any. I'm going to maybe speak a little bit more when we have the report on the sort and go 3 scheme in terms of identifying those individuals or industries that contribute to that waste stream that we can maybe focus our attention on, and it's already being done, I can see. And then just a quick comment in terms of whenever we raise fees. And I'm glad the eco fee for the mattresses is being identified and being a lobby to be brought up onto those. Anytime we start charging fees, there is the potential for that waste to be diverted into the back road areas. And I know in terms of the monitoring process that we have, TFN is out monitoring those back areas. It's just be something to keep on the radar. I suspect the $3 increase is not going to make a major difference, but it would be something to keep an eye on in terms of when we do increase those fees to make sure that we're not diverting it to places that we don't want it to be brought. So I'll leave it there, and I'll look to the board for if someone would, or to the committee, sorry, to put forward this resolution.
I will do that. I will move that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors give 3 readings and adoption to bylaw R1033-4, West Coast Landfill Tipping Fee and Regulation Amendment 2023.
Seconded by Director Veda. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Now we're on to some reports. Looking forward to this. And we have first report, an invitation for West Coast Landfill Upgrades grand opening event. And I see our CAO, Danielle, with his hand well raised. I'll go over to Danielle.
Sorry, Chair, before jumping to that agenda item, on the subject of UBCM meetings, and given the decision around transit, but also the discussion around recycling mattresses, is this an item? Do we want to be bringing the recycling of mattresses beyond the letter to ask for a meeting around that issue? And if so, we'll add it to our list. But if not, then we'll keep it to just a letter to the province. I was trying to jump in before you moved on to the next item.
Yeah, your screen moves all around my board for some reason. I'll look to the committee to see if there's interest in that, and maybe get a little. I don't know, maybe if Jenny would be able to speak to what the value in speaking directly to a minister in this case, or if a letter, and I see Paula's on there as well. If a letter would be sufficient, and maybe get a little advice from them, and then we can make a formal recommendation if it's felt that a minister meeting would be appropriate.
I'd be happy to speak to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that this would not hurt. We have sent letters on actually a couple items. One of them is the mattresses, which the ministry is great. They do put out, letters of intent and long-term plans on what they're going to do next for the recycling regulation, because there are a lot of areas to tackle. And it depends on where the interest sort of lies within the province on what they add to the recycling regulation as it expands. But there are a number of issues, and we've sent letters. One of them is also the commercial recycling not being allowed in the residential stream, which is unique to us being very problematic because we're rural, but a lot of the other rural regional districts also struggle with that. From a staff perspective, we would be happy to go through and sort of put together a little package on what we have sent to the ministry to date and the ongoing issues. They do continue to consult with us, so it's not that, they're not doing their job, but a little extra pressure would never hurt, would be my thoughts on that.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And with that advice, I'll look to the committee. Danielle, would that be sufficient, or would you need a resolution from the committee to the board, or is that enough information? I think, and I'm looking, and I think there would be general support then for having conversation with the minister responsible.
I think, given this discussion, we'll add it to the list of things we bring to the board, and I'll turn to Jenny and Paulo and whatnot as we draft a recommendation to talk about those elements in greater detail. So we'll bring a specific resolution to the board if that's okay. And I'll just flag 30,000 recycled mattresses. When we were at they had an open house at the facility right in the port of Port Alberni. And they did flag that 30,000 recycled mattresses stacked end to end will take us from the port of Port Alberni to Nanuus. And so, you know, when that is quite an image to think of the distance that you'd be driving over mattresses from Port Alberni to Nanuus. It is no small feat. So it's great imagery, and it's great that we're recycling that rather than burying it. So anyway, thank you for that, and I'll step out of the way again.
Well, you do bring up a good point, though. If you really think of that in terms of the volume that would be into our landfills, it is incredibly significant, and that image really solidifies that for me. So thank you for putting that forward. That's great. So I think yes. So we're into reports, and there was the first one on the agenda was the invitation for West Coast Landfill Upgrade grand opening event. And I see Paulo there. Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody, and happy Wednesday. So yeah, we'll get into things here. So the invitation is exactly what it looks like. As you know, we applied a while back to get funding from the Strategic Priorities Fund to go and put together an organics facility, and also take advantage of that opportunity to upgrade our tipping fee area and kind of centralize things a little bit closer to the scale attendant building. So after a lot of work in tendering, retendering, et cetera, we've been able to complete the first phase of that project. So the tipping fee, the tipping wall is being commissioned as we speak. The organics pad is now operational, and we're actually just going through the fun part, which is the training and playing with all the material in there. So this is the invite to the committee, to elected officials, administrators, media, public works staff, of course, our contractors, to come and check the site out and see what the new shiny all looks like. And this will be slated for July 5th from 1 till 3. So I'll just leave it there and open it up for any questions.
Great. Thanks, Paulo. I do appreciate it. And I think my schedule is going to allow me to be there. So great. Is there any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none. Great. Thank you, Paulo. Appreciate that. Next on the report says West Coast Sort and Go 3-stream waste collection 6-month update. This is very exciting too, by the way, and I'm looking forward to this.
You betcha. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jody put together a brief summary this is a nice opportune time because we finished off kicking everything to the households by the beginning of December, and guess what? 6 months, here we are, you know. So just some quick takeaways. I'll go down the list here. There we go. Just so I can read properly. So first 6 months of the new curbside program, just some quick highlights. We've captured 368 tons of curbside material. Out of that, pulled 130 tons of organic waste, which was successfully diverted into our composting area. And that's a 30% reduction in curbside waste. Some of the drill down points, and I'll talk a little bit about it later on as well in the annual report, but the snapshot, I guess, for that is you've gone from a point where 50% of the material going out is recycling, the rest of it is garbage. You've jumped it up from that single family household stream to nearly 50% diversion for those first 6 months, which is, I don't have the words. It's awesome, you know. Some of the quick data that Jody's put together here, it just breaks down what it looks like, a little bit more granular for households. You know, household garbage generation has cut, as I mentioned, nearly in half, from almost 8 kgs per household per week down to 4 kgs per household per week. Initial success there. We've seen that, you know, it's about a 66% participation. It is still a new program, so things have obviously slowed in the winter and ramped up as we get into the summer months, and the organics carts are being used far more often. We've seen recycling generation slightly decrease from, you know, roughly 3 kgs to just a little over 2 kgs per household per week. Changes in the program, and definitely, you know, with recent changes with Recycling Depot, which I'll talk about later on. And the organic stream is fairly steady on roughly a little over 2.5 kilograms per household per week that is getting spat out and feeding into that system there. So later on, you'll see there are some quick metric charts just for visibility here, just to show you what it looks like. Our diversion capture rate, as mentioned, 51.5%. It's a major achievement. And you know, a huge shout out goes to Jody and the rest of the team working with Zinc, working with our contractor, working with Taloquiet and Uthulithat First Nations for the deployment. You know, 1,700 households. That works out to 4,500 carts in really not great weather, you know, back in the day there, but we got it all out in time. There's a massive education program as well that Zinc conducted with us, working with Surfrider, as well as folks from WildSafe BC and other volunteers. And so now we slave over into the next part of it, which is the training, the operations, the debugging, seeing how it all works together, and then looking at some of the future pieces, how we phase in commercial organics and bring that material into the waste stream, because there's a lot that can be contributed in there. So those are kind of the big takeaways I have right now. I'll just leave it there and open it up for questions.
Great, thank you, Paula. I'll just look to, once again, to our committee, see if there's any questions or comments. Not seeing any. I do have, you know, in the sort of there was a component there where there was room for improvement in the garbage stream composition, specifically around compost in recyclables in the garbage stream. Was identified as an area for room for improvement, and that was through that waste composition study. And so will we be looking at an education process through there, and then once again to follow up, is there in terms of those composition studies to see how we're tracking, how we're doing, is that something that will be ongoing with the program?
The short answer, thank you, Mr. Chair, it's a great question. The short answer is yes. This was the initial, hey, let's see what it looks like as we get into the pre-tourist season. Also, simultaneously lining up the larger waste composition study for not just that area, but the AV waste shed as well. So it'll be an ongoing piece, you know. And you're right, a key piece of that, especially for the initial thing, is what material are we seeing going into that curbside stream? How do I say it? That focuses what our education piece has to be. You know, a lot of what we see are your typical, you're usually seeing, you know, plastic bags of material going in, you know, that's very common, like all the little plasticky litter pieces. So there's a lot to educate on what goes into that cart, and also what else can be pulled out of the garbage cart. Because as we've seen from the prelim audit we did not too long ago, there's definitely more work to be done. So that'll be an ongoing piece here. Yeah, that's about it. So hopefully that answered that question.
It certainly did. Yeah, and just a quick follow up, and it may be when you speak to the operating environmental report. This might be something, once again, a UBCM question, and I see an opportunity to lobby the higher levels of government in terms of the source issues, in terms of the packaging industry, for example, and where we might be able to work to eliminate some of that at a higher level. Groups such as Surfrider, I know, has worked on this issue, and we have great connections here at the municipality in Tofino, and I certainly know a good relationship with the ACRD. So it's something that we may be able to talk about into the future and bring that forward, which I think will be critical in reductions in the big population level conversation. So thank you so much for that work. And seeing no, yeah. Oh, thought I heard comment in the background there. Could be my cat. Well, we can move on to the next report agenda on the agenda here, and it is the landfill annual operating environmental report, and I'm looking to Paulo again.
You bet. Okay, so thank you again. I'm going to talk a lot, so I apologize for that. But let me just do share screen here. And we're going here, and we're going here. And okay, everybody could see the title screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Awesome, awesome. All right, here we go. Let's hit play on this. Play. There we go. Okay. So what you see before you is a copy of the annual report here. Now, for the directors on the call that haven't seen this sort of thing before, just a brief of a preamble. So what we do is, as you know, we have landfills on West Coast and on the AV. And so what we do is we capture everything that happened with that specific landfill site. And a lot of that has to meet, as is required to meet compliance regulation. You need to talk about what came in, what got diverted, how your environmental program went, changes in infrastructure, all those sorts of things. So a few years ago, Jenny and the team worked together to put this into a more holistic kind of report to say, this is what the landfill is doing, but this is also everything that happened regarding solid waste out on, in this case, the West Coast. So this is a more sort of holistic report that you'll see. We've had multiple reports like that over the years. This is the latest one that that covers off everything that we did in 2022, and we'll talk about what's coming up and what's going on kind of thing there. So that's just kind of a brief preamble. I will jump right into things here. As you can see for the overview, we're going through mission targets. Everything's got to have goals, and we've got a series of goals we'll go through. We cover off solid waste generation, waste diversion, and sort and go as it's new, landfill capacity. We'll talk about finances, environmental monitoring, projects we did, and what's coming up. So we'll focus on this one. And I always pause here to just kind of go over this. This is essentially, this is what drives us. So the goal mission is to protect human health, the environment, and maximize value of service by effectively managing the region's solid waste in an environmentally, socially, and economically responsible manner. And to do that, there are key goals, key targets that we go after. So we reduce landfill disposal to less than 400 kilograms per person, increase diversion of waste, all waste, to 50%. A minimum airspace consumption ratio of 750 kilograms per cubic meter. What that means is how much you can compress your waste into a solid cubic meter. The best I can give for a visual is imagine a fish toe. So how much of the leftover material you've not diverted can you compact into that space? In other words, to allow for the space in the landfill to last a little bit longer. That's our target that we go after. What are the annual contributions to meet funding requirements? We have to take care of the landfill for decades and decades and decades. Monitoring capital infrastructure, it's something that you never truly walk away from. Environmental monitoring, you confirm all leachate is treated to meet freshwater aquatic life criteria. That's the goal. And then landfill gas generation stays less than 1,000 tons per year of methane. So jumping straight into some numbers and stats. This graph shows quite briefly the amount of waste that's been disposed of over the last 5 years, and that is per capita. And in comparison, the green line shows you the target. So as you can see, we're a lot higher than the target. The idea is we're aiming to get as low as we possibly can. One of the ways to do that, obviously, is the diversion of organics, which I'll talk about later in the slide. I'll note here that in 2022, we disposed of nearly 7,300 tons of waste material into the landfill. That is actually higher than 2021 by about almost 10%. Some key takeaways from that is we saw increase in construction waste demolition with a very small increase in residential sector, likely due to an uptick in private vacation rentals. We do see over 5-year average, the population factoring in tourism is roughly 3% higher. So there's a 3% general increase that we're seeing when you compare tourism numbers as well as the last census that we received. So we talked about that increase in tourism, and just the commercial waste stream in general is up, a lot more activity out in that area. So it really highlights the need to reduce this number, and a lot of what's going to target that is the work that's going to be done with the solid waste management plan update. A lot of engagement, a lot of work with the waste composition studies. Where's that low-hanging fruit that we can really drop that number down and divert more of that material away? So just wanted to flag that. Bear with me. This next slide is we talked about the diversion. This is the tonnage of material, again, over the 5 years, including the latest 2022. Diversion didn't really change in amount. We had roughly 22% of waste diversion last year for stewardship items and non-stewardship items, recyclables, those kinds of things. pretty much the same as this year, and it's relatively static for a few reasons. While we saw things like, initially we see our yard waste or organics, which you look at 2022, you can see there's a jump in there for obvious reasons. We just started the program, so that literally captures that December spike that we have for residential and self-haul. We're also capturing commercial recycling numbers that we didn't have before. So that is any sort of recyclables, divertible materials that went into private commercial recycling programs. We don't control those, but we're interacting more and more with the folks to try to get a fuller picture of what's actually being diverted, disposed of out in the West Coast, much like we do over in the AV. We do see some slight increase in the other diversion streams, such as mattresses. The compost pilot that we'd started last couple of years with, I believe they're called Coastal Compost now. The new organics we talked about, and cardboard. We also see an effect of decreased recycled BC volumes, your household recyclables, and likely that's due to some of the changes in the depot operating hours that we saw last year in Ucluelet. Now, jumping into the Sort and Go program, and still on waste diversion, we did a snapshot of the first 4 months at the time. So December right through the end of March to take a look at what our waste diversion numbers here. The key highlights, as you can see, 1,730 homes onboarded, curbside diversion jumped up to 50%, 4,500 carts, resulted joint education and outreach with multiple partners, and introduction of three-stream into multiple new communities, specifically in Tlaloquet and Uthulafat, at the communities of Tatsu, Azwista, and Taistanis. The teams out there were instrumental, as I mentioned before, in helping us get those carts out there and get the program underway. So now we're slaving into the education portion. That's where we're going here. We developed the Sort and Go brand as well, as we talked about. And as mentioned before, the funding for this program primarily came from the Strategic Priorities Fund. So that was used for the capital purchase of the carts, as well as the organics facility and material as well. So yeah. Now I'm about to jump into landfill capacity. I'll hit a pause though for a second there. Are there any questions as we go? I'll open it up for Q&A at the end, but just in case, because I'm shotgunning a lot of information right now. If not, I'll keep going. Okay.
I don't see any on the screen there, Paulo, but so go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, landfill capacity. So this is a great aerial shot of earlier in the year of the West Coast landfill, looking from the, what would it be, from the north, looking south. So some key takeaways. Airspace consumption jumped from, typically it's been, again, picture the fish tote, compacting material about 560 kilograms per cubic meter. Working with the landfill operations staff and upgrading some of the calculations. We got to get some new surveys to see how things have been going for the last few years, and they hit the target. They the density factor that they hit cleared our 750 kgs per cubic meter. They're actually at 757, so that's a major accomplishment on their part. And a lot of that, again, it's data. It's upgrading those numbers, and it's hard work on, as you can see here where the compactor's working, really keeping the active face, the structure of the landfill very tight as you slowly sculpt that hill. And with that, we consumed approximately 9,600 cubes of airspace, leaving remaining roughly 40 years worth of airspace left. So it actually expanded a little bit. Thanks again a lot to the density work that the folks have been doing out there. But, a lot of it is also, I guess, to highlight here, keeping track of opportunity to divert more. We initially diverted some organics, which is great. We know there's more in that stream, and we'll definitely see that as we get into the waste composition audits later on this summer, as we referred to earlier in the meeting here. So that is going to drive a lot of that. That will wind up allowing us to put a lot less in the landfill and divert elsewhere. This one's a fairly simple but complex slide in that it highlights when we talk about lifespan, we're talking about making this asset last as long as possible. And that's before you get to the point of where you close the landfill and you continue to monitor and keep track of that as it slowly settles down. So it's a long-term asset that you maintain over, as mentioned, decades and decades. Jumping into finances, 2022 contributions, maintained under the old design operation closure plan, which is the how-to manual for how you build this specific landfill. Contributions have to be at a minimum of 70 grand per year. We've exceeded that. We contributed 126,000 for closure and post-closure, and that was deliberate. That was to be able to factor in up-to-date costs. The DOCP is around 10 years old, and we want to factor in updated contractor costs for what you would need to actually put in closure systems. So that is what that number represents. That is the money that it gets put away so that you can slowly cover in and put in your layer over top of different phases of that landfill. Because at some point, some of the hill has to be covered off so that you can keep the rainwater off, keep clean water clean, and minimize any impacts that you have with the site. The rest of it is the nearly $400,000 for capital contributions, and that's for any sort of capital infrastructure projects. You know, we'll be working at some point on leachate upgrades, closure phases, those kinds of things. We, as mentioned before, you'll see a spike in here where we talked about reserve funds allocation. That is the, I'll say, in and out that represents the $3 million for the strategic priorities fund that went into capital, and it's reflected here in operations. So you can see how that money transitions over to pay for the work that we did last year. The closure post-closure fund at the end of 2022 was up to 1.23 million, as you can see here. And I don't have any other takeaways for this side. Any questions on this?
Yeah, I do, Paulo. Just quickly on that. Thank you for this. This is great. And one of the areas that we look at that I would like to make sure if we've identified what the optimal contributions are going to be needed over the long term. And if we have identified that and to make sure that we are taxing appropriately to make sure that over the long term, as you mentioned clearly, we're not walking away from this project. This is decades old. We want to make sure that we are correctly identifying the optimal contributions for the long term.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, sir. And I'll just comment briefly, not to bury the lead, but one of the projects is that DOCP. We did this with the AV. We're going to be updating that as a project for 2024. And the idea is to factor in exactly those costs so that nothing gets missed, so that we'll know what we're dealing with for the next 5 years of the plan. And away we go.
Great. Thank you, Paul.
You bet. All right. Let me put this around here. So the environmental monitoring report, we had, as you can see here, we run field sampling, which is collected by our ACRD staff, our water staff that work with my colleague Eddie Kunderman. And through the sampling work there, that is taken out and analyzed in an accredited lab, where the results are reviewed by our consultant, which is Pito and Associates. So they've compiled an environmental monitoring report, which is attached to this. I won't go into heavy detail because it's a lot. But essentially they run our environmental monitoring program and provide recommendations. You know, are there changes that we need to do with, controlling leachate? Are there interim additional sampling tests that we need to do? Sampling is typically quarterly, and then there is a larger annual report that is generated at the end of it to summarize all the activities that happened. One of the key things that we flagged in past, and this is for the benefit of the directors that were not on the committee before, is we do run into overflow events because of very high rainflow, winter storms. Does wonders for diluting a lot of the leachate material, but it also highlights that at some point we need to upgrade the leachate system that we have in place. We have on the site, and I'll show on a map here shortly, a large perforated pipe area where we decant the leachate, and it percolates through the site there before it goes and discharges. But in the case of rainstorm events, the pond system can be overwhelmed, and you can have a lot of water that will divert through the overflow pipes out into the neighboring creeks. So we go and we sample that on a regular basis. We track the decant events that we have. I'll flag here that we had above average rainfall for the record rain winter season we had from 2021, 2022. So Q1, we saw over 40% of our water showed up in just that period of time alone. Year's precipitation was nearly 2,800 millimeters. I'll also flag that we have a future project which is going to upgrade the leachate treatment system, installing a larger pond and looking at an engineered wetland to do further polishing of the system itself. And what other pieces that I'll take away from this is just a quick overview. You'll see the sampling area. This is the engineering diagram that we have, and just kind of freezing this image in your mind with the creek over to the west here. This is the actual view of the landfill overhead prior to our capital project, which happened over here. Lagoon system is here. Future leachate system is going to be expanded here. Right now, it pipes through and percolates into the trees on the north side here, still within our site. But the plan is to put in an engineered wetland system up on this side here to contain more of that material and prevent loading on the surrounding environments. So that's something that is scheduled for long term. We will have some minimal infrastructure work that we're going to be doing around the pond this year, though. And then the last little bit on environmental is landfill gas. Just a quick takeaway. You'll see this 1,000 tons per year for methane. What does that mean? That is specific to the landfill gas regulation under the province. You go to a point where you're modeled at generating more than 1,000 tons of methane per year. That's when you have to put an active landfill gas capture system. Super expensive, lots of piping in the ground. And you really have to go through a big cost benefit analysis to see if that is actually worth it, because you don't actually generate enough to necessarily use beneficial reuse options. So the idea is, if you're looking at smaller sites, if you don't have to put an active system in, divert as much of the material that creates that. And that happens to be the putrescible waste, the organic waste that you see going into the landfill, which is interrelated to why we went down the road of the capital project to begin with. If the organics are not in there, the remaining material that you see that generates methane that slowly spikes off just simply falls off and stays well below that threshold. We're modeled well below the trigger threshold regardless, although we do track it. We're going to do a supplementary gas report this year, just a simple exercise with one of our consultants to go and revise that number. But essentially, that's just something that we have to track on a regular basis and report out to the ministry. Switching over into operations. Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, they conducted the inspection as they do every couple of years or so, and some key follow-up items were flagged. One of them was the new organics facility completing registration requirements. We put in a notification back in August last year, so that has been put to bed. But it's essentially notifying them that yes, there is an organics facility in the actual landfill site, and it'll be coming online. They also wanted to see confirmation requirements on soil disposal. That's a follow-up discussion with the ministry. Some additional monitoring and sampling, which is recommended out of specifically PETO, our environmental monitoring consultants, and updating documentation reflecting all recent infrastructure upgrades at the site. That is the overflow piping, the capital infrastructure, any scale upgrades, all of those sorts of things. The other pieces that'll flag here is we also track for customer feedback at the site. We don't see a lot per se because of just the location of the site. We're just immediately outside Parks Canada bounds, and we're not surrounded by a lot of households. So we look for your typical vectors, which are, odor, noise vectors, i.e. animals coming in, loose waste, those kinds of things. No documented concerns received from the community, no odor and noise complaints. That has everything to do with the operators that are out there. We're going to be going through upgrades as we see as we train with the new organics facilities. So there'll be more to come, but that's kind of the takeaway for operations for last year. And just jumping into projects. So our project completed in 2022. We talked about it here, but organics free stream expansion of curbside. went through the stats. December, we diverted 40 tons of organics just from the residential program alone, never mind the self-haul or the pilot composting program. So it was a great success overall. And we were able to establish service agreements with Tloquit and Uthulithat First Nation to introduce Three Stream to their 220 homes. It's something they hadn't had before. So new program, working with educators out there. They did a fantastic job. And as you can see here, there's a shot of their yards folks that are moving some of the organics carts around and some of our teams rolling the carts out in the first place here. The other piece related to that is West Bay Education Outreach. We worked with staff, our staff, obviously, Zinc, Surfrider, WildSafe, filtering out information through our local partners, working with the districts, with Tloquit, with Uthulithat, and the big one, which was really cool, was working with the language specialists to create not a generic, but a kind of a one-size-fits-all for how, you know, organics, curbside recycling, and garbage in general work. So putting in some of the traditional language names for each of these things so they could get some cool takeaways to assist educators in working with these new programs. So no matter where you are, you get a good sense of what goes where, which is always that big challenge to communicate with folks. As you can see, some imagery of some of the open houses that we conducted in Yuki and Tofino as well. Landfill upgrades, as I talked about, just some quick snapshots of the site as we got underway last year. But those of you that may have been out to the site will have seen that things have changed a fair bit. So hopefully we'll get to take a good look at it when we get to the event on July 5th. As we talked about earlier, there'll be some environmental monitoring improvements that we conducted last year. So continue to work with PITO and ACRD field staff, refining the procedures. We did note that there was one sampling area that we had to take offline due to danger of woody debris and all that sort of thing. So we just shifted that along the creek area so that we could still adequately sample. We also updated our solid waste bylaw, as we talked about earlier, introduced no organics tipping fees, and put in pieces around folks that did not have a collection program, thinking about putting in a solid waste management plan. How are they going to divert recycling? How are they going to divert organics and minimize the garbage they put out so everything goes in the right spot? And then last little bit on the rope and netting program for the directors that were not with us before. This is a long-standing partnership, a pilot partnership over the last few years. We've worked with Ocean Legacy and Surfrider. There is a depot at the site that will take in from any of the ocean cleanup events, any excess rope and netting. And the idea is the material then goes back out to a group called Ocean Legacy. Their foundation is based over in Steveston Harbor and on the mainland. And what they do is they'll take the material and turn it into plastic feedstock. So they'll cut it down right into the beads. And the idea is it turns into similar to what you'd see in park benches, that plastic lumber. They're working through signboards right now, and that process seems to be working fairly well. So finding an avenue to take that unwanted waste and turn it into something really beneficial. For last year, captured another 19.5 tons of rope and netting, and they, out of the stockpile that we had there, they were able to recycle another nearly 46 tons of material, as well as an additional 18 tons of just plastic, your old totes and stuff like that that come up from the ocean cleanups. So really successful program so far, with more to come. And speaking of more to come. So we talked about this. Our surveyor was able to get us a really nice overview of the West Coast landfill. So this is the site. I'll highlight this here for a moment here. We've obviously commissioned the facility upgrades. And so what I'll just kind of walk it clearly around, we've got some labeling here. The old tipping area, or the existing tipping areas, you'll see here. There's the landfilling area here, temporary compost area we put up last year in order to give us time to get the compost pad online. And then the new tipping area that we've put in, this Z wall, which will have the bins located in place. Customers will come in along the maintenance road, come up to this area. We'll have the the bikes, the mattresses, tipping wall for metal and garbage, all of those sorts of things will be located up on this site here. So ideally, everything is centralized right by the scale attendant building. So it keeps the bulk of residential customers and commercial composting customers as well down in this area and minimizes the traffic that need to go up to the actual landfill site. And what else to take away here? As you can see, we took some, these are actually some of the pictures we took just a few weeks ago with our contractor, organics processing contractor. I think some folks might recognize our solid waste project coordinator in action there. And we're just taking in the first few loads and putting it over the new aeration system, putting in temperature probes, all that sort of thing. So you'll get to see that process when we get out to site on July 5th. Yeah, really, really good project. Lots more to come. And we're now in the debugging phase. Other initiatives talked about already. We have the big solid waste management plan update that's happening both in this waste shed as well as the AV waste shed. So there'll be a massive engagement program underway. Jody spoke to the advisory committee in the last board meeting. So that's sort of the initial piece there that we're seeing. But the idea is we're going to be kicking off engagement in the fall once committees are set up, terms of reference are finalized. And we'll be working on, you know, what do we want to see? What are our next targets? We've accomplished the bulk of our previous solid waste management plan. So what's next? And there's going to be a lot of discussion around that. In line with that, there's going to be a waste composition study, as I mentioned before. So similar to what you see in the imagery here. We conducted a big one back in 2019 and then focused strictly on curbside as we rolled out 3Stream in Port Alberni and on West Coast. We're now going to go back and do the big landfill audit at West Coast as well as AV and really break down the material to see what's coming from where, what the sources are, what are the low-hanging fruit pieces, you know, commercial, more organics, recyclables. Where can we pick out those key pieces? Because that will affect everything we do with solid waste management plan, and it'll affect the other piece, which is our waste education outreach. How do we communicate how to segregate your waste, how to minimize contamination, all of those sorts of things. With the waste education piece, we're contracting a third-party contractor for outreach and strategy development, and that'll be building out on our existing social media campaigns, information handouts to residents and businesses, community events, and school education as well. So those are the big ones that we have on our docket for this year. And then as well, we just talked about tipping fees briefly, but harkening back to a comment from, I guess, a couple of committee meetings ago, we're doing a larger tipping fee review, which is to say we're looking at all materials, comparing the cost going into processing the different waste streams. And the idea is we're going to do this on an annual basis. We're going to come back to the committees with a tipping fee review to say, like, here's where things are at, look at recommendations for either upping or changing the structure of our tipping fees. We're also extending the landfill contract. We've extended the contract with Barrie and Vale for an additional year to give us time to feel out our operation structure for organics, because the idea is we'll be going out to RFP next year, and we'll be including organics processing as part of the operations for that landfill site. So that's coming up. I spoke briefly about the landfill gas supplementary report. That's something that we require every 5 years. Flow monitoring infrastructure. You'll see the imagery around the, this is the leachate lagoon here, and the leachate dish goes off to the right here. We'll be working on some minor infrastructure upgrades on this ditch system. And then we're also researching temporary cover options for the landfill as well. And similar to what you see with the roll bar device we see on this compactor at a different site. The idea is you're shielding some areas of the landfill that once you fill that section, you're probably not going back there for another, say, year or 2 years. So given that, you want to put a layer in there so that you can, I'll use the quote, keep clean water clean. So you could shed a lot of that surface water, not allow it to percolate into the landfill, and thus create more leachate, more loading. So that's something that we're working on. And We're building towards some of the longer term projects here. The buildup is going to be towards an organic span, so no more food waste going into the actual landfill itself. The work that we're doing now regarding 3-stream, regarding solid waste management plan, is essentially going to be building up to that. So discussion will be that goal. How do we actually ban organic material from the landfill? And it's the same sort of structure that'll be going with the Alberni Valley site as well. So that's something that we're targeting as our goal. We're aiming for ideally in 2024, but we're going through those steps to see what can be done to get to that point. We'll be working with construction demolition group, as we know that 30% of the waste stream on the West Coast comes from that. You know, think of the demolition from the school last year in Euclid, I believe it was. So we'll be engaging with the commercial demolition folks as well as part of that whole technical advisory group that we talked about for the solid waste management plan. So all of these are interrelated to feed into those outputs for the next couple of years here. We are also updating the design operation closure plan, as I talked about. So there's our hill from the overhead view, and it's going to be a map of how we phase in, how we fill over the next 10 years, and look to update every 5 years after that. And then the last piece there is looking at leachate treatment facility, a bit of 2023. But mostly 2024 is going to be working on design. What is the upgraded leachate treatment facility going to look like to achieve our environmental compliance pieces, to stay underneath that quality and make sure that, you know, we don't impact the surrounding environment. So that piece is going to be owing over the next year and a half. The design work is going to be done in 24, with the idea that we're targeting 25, 26, depending on construction season, to actually build the facility and ensure that funding is secured. And that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing. If I can find it, hang on. There we go. And I'll open it right up for questions.
Thank you, Paulo. That's phenomenal, and I've got a whole page here, so it might take another hour. But anyways, I'll look to the committee here to see if there's any questions or comments for you. It was a tremendous amount of material that might take some time to digest for the folks here, and there may be some follow-up later on. But I'll look to the committee right now if there's anything direct. Director McEwen.
Thank you. Through the chair, not a question so much as a comment. It's amazing how fascinating all this actually is. And I remember when I was first elected as a councillor 8 years ago, we had a tour of the landfill and the airport. And both of those tours were really valuable to help us understand the workings of both of those facilities. So I was hoping that a little tour would be part of the July 5th open house.
Thank you, Director. Absolutely. That'll be part of it. We'll get to see the site. We've got a couple hours to hang out there. So ironically, most of what we want is going to be right in that area there, but it does give the opportunity that we can wander up and take a look at the actual active face and the area where we're actively landfilling kind of thing. So yep, you betcha. That'll give that opportunity.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking to the rest of the committee, seeing no hands being raised. I have so much it might be something that we just talk about offline, but I just want to start out by saying how incredible the amount of work and when we look at the projects initiated and completed in this 2022 cycle, it's phenomenal. It really is. So a huge shout out to Paulo and the staff there on your team that has worked I mean, it really is phenomenal. I think you guys are leaders in this area, and it's been shown by your commitment to the process. And it's really interesting as a society how we deal with our waste. And I think what I'm seeing through the ACRD is a different lens and a different approach to how we deal, which is a hidden but critical component of servicing our communities. So I really thank you once again for that. A couple of questions. Just quickly, if the opportunity to forward the presentation to the committee members and to the board in general, I think would be valuable, just so that we can, there's so much detail. It'd be wonderful to dig in a little deeper. That would be wonderful, before I forget. And I just wanted to comment a couple of big things. The mission and targets that you identified are spot on. They still resonate and hold true. And I think one of the big things that I'm taking away have for the last couple of years is the importance of that solid waste management plan as that guiding tool and document, and in any way that the committee or the board can help in any way to expedite or to provide the resources that are necessary, please do not ever hesitate to reach out on that. I know how critical that is to the overall. I know it will take time. We like these things to move faster than slower, but recognize the complexity of this and making sure we get it right. So I do want to thank you on that. Once again, education for some of the waste diversion streams is going to be critical, and you've identified and we'll be contracting out that service, identifying how important that is. It's a continual process, as I'm sure you're all well aware. It's just not a snapshot or a one-shot deal. It's a continual, just as the commitment to a landfill is for decades and decades. I think that you're spot on once again. I can go on forever and ever, but in the brevity, in lieu of time, I'll leave it at that, and just want to thank you guys once again for the tremendous work that's being done on there. If there's nothing else from the committee, I think we'll move on with the report agendas. Oh, it looks like Paulo, we've got how recycling works, number D on the agenda. So we'll keep rolling.
We'll keep rolling, absolutely. No, thank you for that. And I can't highlight enough, again, a huge team effort, everybody involved. It's so much. Yeah, so let me just bear with me as I retool here, and hopefully I don't lose you folks on the screen. Oof. Okay, I'm just firing up the slideshow, and there you are, and we'll do a share right there. Okay, same question, title screen coming up, okay? Sweet, okay. So this is essentially a tool that we wanted to put together for, it's an education piece, it's something we want to kind of keep track of, and the origin story for this is, as we talked about, where's recycling go? It is that question that we've heard ever since, well, years. It goes right back to the National Sword movement in China, leads up to, where is this material going? Is it actually getting recycled? We still get those questions on a regular basis, and understandably so, because things change, and especially technology changes as well. So does the material stay here? Does it go elsewhere? Does it get repurposed? So what we want to do is generate a quick sort of PowerPoint. We're going to have this up on our website, and just kind of refining it. But Brenda, Jody, and the rest put this together here to kind of showcase what our facilities are, what we have for different programs, where it all goes, and just some highlights of examples that of how the material gets to kind of close loop. So I'll just slip right through here. I'll skip past AV. And what we've done is just basically keeping the theme of the whole 5-year average that we always do is we show our the tonnages, the percentage diversion. We show everything that happens over the span of, in a given year. So West Coast Landfill, for example, it's the one recycling site that we do run. So we've got, oops, bear with me. So this showcases what the recycling service is. In other words, what services we do provide out there at the site, the steward and facilitator. So what programs operate these different things, how it's funded, and to say that is who's actually putting in dollars for it, whether it's an in-kind and there's no real money changing hands, or if there's actually if there's actually a stewardship company that's covering it off and providing some offset revenue back. And then the end market talks about, where those materials are finally going. So I'll just pick out just a couple of quick highlights in here. You'll see the metal tires and propane tanks, typically metals, that'll go through Schnitzer Steel. They site bins out at our site here, and most everything they utilize, they'll wind up smelting in BC and US. Typically, they'll work through Trail, I think is one of the big areas where they do pile of their smelting and then separate out the metals and put it back out into new products. And also they'll, with the tires, they'll also extract out the rubber and use that as feedstock. You'll see those in various areas around North America and even here at home, which is the park spaces, the tire crumble that you see that become that rubber surface for the water parks and all that sort of thing. That's what feeds that. Electronics are typically mostly in Canada, with some materials going to US, Mexico, Belgium, Japan, and China. And they look for key pieces of those different materials, whether you're pulling the silicone, the baseboards, the metals. They utilize all those different materials and will turn them into new products, as well as even new circuit boards. Bike shed is typically just an exchange. So folks have seen it out at the site. They'll drop off bikes, and as needed, people will come in and pick up those bikes just free of charge, keeps them out of the landfill. Yard waste and compost we've talked about, operates off of a tipping fee piece. We have obviously a diversion option for that. That's kind of the big takeaway for West Coast Landfill. This is just showcasing the tonnage over the last several years. As you can see, tonnage has definitely gone up. We back in 2016, 750 tons of material diverted, and it's slowly gone up and up and up and up. And that's, part of that is we didn't have a complete picture. Even as we sit here, we still don't know the full extent of everything that is being diverted. We know there are still private programs that take material and they just never come out to the landfill, which is great because it's diverting waste from that area. But as it stands, we're up to 2,000 tons of material diverted last year. So yeah. And then this just shows a graph that you saw in the annual report as well. And then I'm just showcasing a couple of the other sites. We have the Banfield Transfer Station, very simplistic site, just takes in recycled BC materials. And then the Third Ave Depot in Port Alberni, folks may or may not have seen it, has a series of stewardship programs: paint, bulky materials, household batteries, books, diabetes, clothesline, those kinds of things. I'll stop sharing for a second just so this doesn't create a lot of noise. So the idea behind that is to show folks how, again, show them how the material is getting fed back into the stream. It is not going into a landfill somewhere else. The irony is when we go into the research and talk with a lot of these stewards or even the private contractors that take the material, it seems like the majority of the material is staying on the North American continent, about 90% or so. The Recycle BC program, as we heard about, household recycling, most of the material stays here. They divert about 2 or 3% overseas to use as fuel for different things. Most everything stays here on the lower mainland and is turned into new products, new packaging materials and things like that. I will note as an aside, although it's not our program, the Recycle BC program does operate privately 2 depots out in the West Coast, as you know, in Tofino and Ucluelet. And just flagging on a comment I heard earlier from some folks a few weeks back, the Ucluelet depot, as you may know, changed and is now the Recycle BC program is operating out of the Bottle Depot in Ucluelet. That's since May 25th, I want to say. And that is the full meal deal. So the curbside type of material, as well as the depot type of material, if you're bringing it in self-hauling, that all can go there. Any of their operating hours, I'm blanking on what they are right now. I think it's like 4 or 5 days a week that they're operating. But the Bottle Depot was able to sign on a contract with Recycle BC, so they're able to operate that program there in conjunction with their other stewardship programs that they have on the site. So I just wanted to flag that because I know was a topic of concern earlier in the year. But yeah, again, education tool, something we'll have and we'll update on an annual basis. So just open to questions.
Great. Thank you, Paulo. Appreciate the info on how recycling is dealt with. I'll look to the committee to see if there's any questions or comments for Don't see any. Just a quick one in terms of the education process around that, and thank you for what we do at the West Coast Landfill specifically. One of the questions that I get often is around, and you alluded to the Recycle BC program and those loose plastics, the hard plastics. And always the question is, do we ship that over? I know that's not our deal, but you indicated roughly about 2 to 3% of that is an overseas product. And that was strictly the BC recycling component that you had information on. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity within our education program as a separate line item to highlight that end of it for folks as well, because it's often a question that I do get asked.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's very relevant. So many people ask the same thing of us. It's something that we definitely want to highlight as far as our education program. So thank you for that. We will.
Great. Seeing no other questions or comments from the group. Thank you once again. That's super important for us to understand. We'll go now into the reports from our ex officio members. I'm going to have to get a definition of what an ex officio is. But we start with Pacific Rim National Park, and I believe Nancy, are you speaking for Pacific Rim, or am I? I got you, and it shows that you're unmuted, but I'm not hearing you, Nancy. I'm not a technical wizard, but if what I might do, Nancy, is I might move down the report list, and I don't know if logging in, logging back out, and I can come back up to you in a minute or two, if that works for you. I'll make sure that I connect with you before finishing up. I didn't see, but I may not have seen on my screen if there's anyone from Ahousaht First Nation online here today. Not hearing or seeing. I'll move on to Tlaloquewait First Nation. I see Jim's here. Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great.
Good.
Is there anything from TFN that want to bring to the table, but thank you for your presence here. If there was anything from TFN that you want to bring forward to the committee?
Just, I think the work that I've heard going on today is wonderful. Just great stuff, and thank you to everybody involved, and to Paulo and your group. Fabulous stuff. This is really encouraging, and certainly our communities are very supportive of everything that's going on. So on behalf of the nation, thank you guys very much.
Great. Thank you, Jim. It means a lot to hear that from the nation. I will look to, I didn't see Heshquit on here, but I'll just make a quick call out in case I'm not seeing it on my screen. Not seeing or hearing. I'll look back to Nancy to see if audio has been sorted. No, I'm seeing Nancy. Hi, I'm sorry, I'm not able to unmute. I'm only an observer today in the absence of Dave. Great. I will read that out in case anybody couldn't see it. Thank you for being there, and I know we'll look forward to hearing from PNRP in the future. So thanks for being here today. If I could I'll move from the table that the West Coast Committee received reports A through E. Seconded by Councillor Johnson. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. As far as I know, there is no late business. I'll look over to the boardroom to see if there were any questions from the public. I didn't see any participants per se, but I may have missed that.
Hi there. There are no participants, and just give me a second while I check the email. And there are no emailed questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And with that, could I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. First and seconded by everybody. All those in favor? I will see no opposition. Thank you. Have a great time. Thanks for everyone for coming out. Take care. And we'll see you on Wednesday, I guess. I'm off to Bamfield right now. I got to grab my boat here in about 45 minutes, so that's perfect timing.